Hey there, everyone! It's me, Nic Sensei, and welcome back to another grammar explanation video. This time, we're looking at words that make your writing and speaking more interesting. That's right, adjectives and adverbs. Let's get started if you're ready. As you can imagine, this presentation has two parts. Part 1 is adjectives, and Part 2, we are going to look at adverbs. Let's get started with Part 1. That's right, we're starting with adjectives. The most important part about adjectives compared to adverbs, remember, they're used with nouns. So let's get started. Let's start off our look at adjectives with the structure. Now, in general, there are two ways to structure adjectives. The most common structure is using them before the noun. So here are three quick examples. My friend bought a beautiful dress. Notice the noun dress. Remember, nouns are people, places, things. They're objects, something you can hold or something you can think about, compared to adjectives, which describe a noun. Here, beautiful is the adjective describing the noun dress. It describes the look, the appearance of the dress. The second example, I watched a funny movie yesterday. Of course, the noun is movie. You got it? The adjective is funny. It means the movie made me laugh. Haha, it was amusing. And the last one, Cassandra is going to be a wonderful mom. Again, mom is the noun. The adjective is wonderful, describing the kind or the type of mom she will be. She will be a good mom, one that is very caring to her children. Okay, let's get started, or let's move on to another part of structure with adjectives. Now, one of the most common errors I see with the structure of adjectives is using them with collective nouns. Think of the noun collective, or the noun collective nouns. Remember, a collection, a group. These are nouns like someone, everyone, somewhere, everywhere. They don't describe a specific person, but they just describe a collection or a general person. So let's start with the first example. I want to buy something nice for my niece for her birthday. Notice the collective noun, something. It's a general thing, a general object. We don't say, I want to buy nice something. The adjective in this case, nice, comes after the collective noun. It's a small point, but it's an important rule of structure in English. Here's the next example. Do you have anything special on the weekend? This is another way to say, will you do anything special on the weekend? Again, the collective noun, anything. Anything means one or more things, but not specifically. And the adjective is special. Comes after the collective noun, anything. The last one, there is nothing interesting to watch tonight. Of course, the collective noun is nothing. The adjective is interesting. Interesting comes after the collective noun. Okay, let's keep talking about structure and all the different kinds of adjectives. So here is a handy chart that gives you a summary of the different kinds of adjectives. It's helpfully in Japanese there for you, but let's run through it in English as well. So the column on the far left, these are what we call determiners. So they tell you what specific object you're describing. It can describe something that is owned, like my, or some, which is a general object. I watched some movie last night. Doesn't tell you what movie, just one movie in general. And also first or 10 can tell you the numbers of them or the order, the first movie I watched. The next one are what we call opinions and evaluations. Remember, these are subjective. They're your idea. They might be thought of differently depending on the person. Beautiful, delicious, nice, interesting, funny. These are the most common ones. And remember that these are out of your opinion. These are ordered from the way you write them. So on the far left, the determiners are written first before the noun. And then we have the opinion and the evaluation adjectives. Next is size. These are also slightly opinion-based. It's kind of your opinion, your choice, if something is big and small. But it's not as subjective. It's not as based on opinion as the ones before, like beautiful. We can agree more on size compared to beauty, I think. The next one, new, old, and young. Again, slightly less opinionated again. We can usually agree if something is new or old. This is if something is new, or the age of something. The next one is shape. Again, that's less opinionated, less based on subjection, your idea. Square, round, triangular, flat. Adjectives like this. Next, color. If you are color blind, you can't see color. This is a difficult one, but usually we can agree on the color. Yellow, white, red, golden, things like this. The next one is the origin, where something comes from. Japanese, Christian, Islamic, American, Canadian, like me. Notice how these are placed closer to the noun. Remember, this is the order of adjectives. And then finally, we have the material, what something is made out of. So notice that that's one of the last adjectives. It's the closest to the noun that we're describing. So let's look at a few more rules related to this. But in general, when you use these adjectives together, you don't need any word or anything to connect them. For example, when I say I bought a, notice that's the determiner, a big, there's the size, new house, there's no commas or conjunctions there. They're all put together. But if you use a category together, like I ate a beautiful and delicious cake. Notice you need and or a comma to separate those subjective adjectives. Let's look at that part next. Okay, so when we are using these subjective adjectives, or any of the adjectives in the same category, like a size adjective or a shape adjective, when they're in the same category, in general, you use the shorter one first. So, my friend is a nice, generous, and hard-working person. Notice all of these are subjective adjectives. They describe your opinion, what you think of the person. So they're all connected with commas or the conjunction and. Notice these are three of them. So you use a comma first and then and for the last adjective in the list. However, when you write with two adjectives, you can write them with either a comma or and. In this example, my sister-in-law is a kind and beautiful lady, using and, or my sister-in-law is a kind, comma, beautiful lady. They are both perfect. There is no difference between them in meaning. I mentioned before that when you have different categories, different kinds of adjectives together, you don't use a comma and you don't use and, the conjunction. So it's incorrect to say, my sister-in-law is a gentle and French lady. We say, my sister-in-law is a gentle French lady. In fact, we treat this as a single noun, French lady. And gentle is the adjective describing the kind of French lady that my sister-in-law is. Okay, let's keep going with this structure of adjectives. Keep those in mind and these different categories. They're very important. Our next kind of adjective is what we call a narrative adjective. It describes the state of someone. Usually it describes an action that is ongoing, or the result of an action. For example, in this sentence, we're talking about someone who is asleep. That is the state after you go to sleep or after you fall asleep. So a lot of these kinds of adjectives start with an A, and they are always placed at the end or after the be verb. They are not placed before the noun. And remember, these are not like collective nouns, like everyone and someone or everything, where the adjective is right after the collective pronoun, like something interesting, anywhere enjoyable. These are placed after the verb. So here's the example. I don't know where my daughter is asleep. My daughter is asleep, but I don't know where she is sleeping. You cannot write, I don't know where my asleep daughter is. Asleep is an adjective, but it's this type of adjective, a narrative adjective. Other examples are afloat, or adrift, or abiotic, not living for that last one. If you see an adjective that starts with A, usually it's placed at the end, after the verb. Let's look at some fun examples of adjectives that sound the same but are very different. Okay, let's look at what we call homonyms. Don't be scared of that word. You might know the word synonym, which are two words that are spelled the same, but they have a different meaning. Or they sound the same, but they have the different meaning. So here, homonyms, they sound, and these ones are actually spelled the same, but they have very different meanings. For example, late. I'm sure you know the most common usage, to not be on time for something. But late also means dead, passed away. So, my late father must be proud of me. That doesn't mean your father is late coming somewhere. It means he's not alive. Compared to, I am late for school. Notice that these adjectives, late, are usually used before the noun. So if you say, my father is late, that never means he is dead. Late is only used before the noun to describe someone that has passed away. The next one is present. So the present issue should be resolved immediately. Present here means current, or the situation that is ongoing right now, something that is still existing. Compare that to our CEO will be present in today's meeting. That means he will be there. He will exist. He will attend the meeting. A slight difference, but a very similar meaning. And the final example, I am allergic to certain food. Certain means a specific food, one food in particular. Compare that to, she is certain that she is going to pass the exam. She is sure. She knows something, and she is confident about it. These are all homonyms, so take care of them when you see them, and especially for that first one with late, remember late as someone who is passed away or dead is used before the noun. Okay, let's move on to one of my favorite errors. Our next example is hyphenated adjectives. This is a very quick look at them. I cover this entire topic in both my Fruitful English textbook, Making English Fun Again, and my misconception courses on Fruitful English. So there's lots more material available. This is just the most common error that I wanted to include. Which of these is correct? You can see the X's there. Remember, when you use hyphenated adjectives, always use the singular form. Never say, it's only a 20 minutes walk from here. No, it's only a 20-minute walk. And you can see in these examples, we use them by combining a number, 20 or 10, and then with some noun. usually a counter noun or something that describes an amount. So the first example, do you have a $10 note? Notice the singular form, dollar. This is describing the amount of money the bill or note is worth. My daughter is a second-year student in primary school. Year describes the level in school. Second is what year. Notice the singular form, second year. And last, Gavin is a 100-meter race champion. Meter describes a distance. 100, how much of the distance? And the meaning of this is the race is 100 meters long. To say it another way, the first example, the note is worth $10. The second one, my daughter has been going to primary school for 2 years. Okay, let's do one review before moving on to part 2. Okay, to finish and review this section, let's go through 2 examples together. So we have this incorrect sentence about cars. My older brother drives a nice German old black car. I hope you can hear the unnatural structure there. For me, as a native speaker, it's hard to read that sentence because it sounds very strange. You may have heard me kind of hesitate when I was reading it. The problem here is, remember that chart of all the different types of adjectives. You can see it there on your screen. So look at all these adjectives, nice, German, old, black, and what category do they fit in? Of course, nice. It fits into the opinion, the subjective category. So it's put first. The next one is the new or old. The new or old segment. So first next we write old. What's next? We have the color. That comes after new and old. That comes after the subjective nice adjective, so we write black. And finally, one of the last category of adjectives is the origin, which is German here. By the way, if you want to put the style of propulsion, how it moves, the kind of engine, it's a common topic now, you would say electric, and that would go at the very end. For example, my older brother drives a nice, old, black, German electric car. Electric is similar to the material that it's made of. We can put it in that category. Or you can also say a petroleum car or a gas-powered car. Many ways to say it. But that would come right before the noun and after nice old black German. The next example, it's very tricky. His mother loves long black dresses. Now, you can see in the chart there that size comes before color. So we also don't need a comma here because these are in 2 separate categories. But I must say there is some disagreement here. His mother loves long black dresses. You can also write his mother loves long and black dresses. Long, comma, black dresses. That really emphasizes that they must be long and black. That means she might not like dresses that are only long, or she might not like dresses that are only black. So this is the more common style. His mother loves long black dresses. Because these are different categories, you don't need a common or a conjunction like and to connect to them. But if you want to change your meaning, you can include them. Just keep that in mind. Okay, that already finishes part 1 with adjectives. Let's move on to part 2. Here we are at part 2. We are looking at adverbs this time. Remember the biggest difference between adverbs and adjectives? Adjectives are used with nouns, of course. Adverbs, they are used with verbs or adjectives or other adverbs. They have lots more uses. So let's look at them starting with structure. We start with the adverb structure, describing adverbs that tell you how something is done. In general, these are used with verbs. So when using adverbs with verbs, they're used two ways. They are either used at the end of the sentence, or they are used after the object in the sentence, either after the verb or after the object in the verb. In the simple first example, Emily runs fast. The verb here is run, so fast is placed afterwards. Nic sensei speaks slowly. The verb speak and the adverb at the end, quickly. Or my boss prepared diligently. My boss prepared thoroughly. Thoroughly, diligently, how the verb plan was done, so it's placed at the end. When you have an object with the verb, though, the adverb is normally placed after that object, normally at the end of the sentence as well. So, Margaret planned a party. Well, here the verb is planned, but we have an object, the noun, a party. So, well, describing how she planned, the kind of way she planned is placed at the end with well. Please handle this package gently, the last example there. Again, handle is the verb. Gently describes how the verb handle was done, the manner, but there's a noun there, this package, an object. So we place gently at the end. There are many kinds of adverbs, and just like adjectives, they are put in different places. So when the adverb describes the verb, how something is done, it's placed after the verb usually, or after the object if there is an object. But let's look at the next kind of adverb. The next kind of adverbs are location and time. In this slide, we'll make it easy, and we'll just look at location. And it's an easy rule. Locate or adverbs showing location or place are always placed at the end. Matthew is studying upstairs. Where is he studying? Upstairs, placed at the end. The next example, I'm learning with Nic sensei online. Notice that online is not really a physical place. I guess if you want to describe the internet as a physical thing, it is a physical network of wires. But online is also treated as an adverb of location there. So you place it at the end. By the way, this is much more natural than saying, I'm learning with Nic sensei on the internet. We say online now because it's much simpler, and we all know online means the internet. Okay, let's move on to the next one of time. The next adverb category is time, and time is placed at the very end. So I mentioned before that location is placed at the end. It is placed at the end, but if you also have a time, that gets priority, and it's at the very end. You can see this in the very first example. I should go home now. Here, there's two adverbs. Home is describing where I will go. Now is describing when I will go. Now is the time, so it comes at the very end after home, which is also at the end. You can also put these time and location adverbs at the beginning. Here, the only examples are with time, but you can also show a location adverb at the beginning as well. Notice this doesn't apply to the other adverbs, like how something is done. Nic speaks quickly. This is only for time and for location. And when you do this, it usually shows emphasis unless you want to separate time and location. For example, yesterday, Margaret came to my house. This is emphasizing that Margaret came to my house yesterday only. So the next example, or the next sentence in a writing could be, the day after, Nic came to my house. So we're emphasizing the time that each person by putting the time first. And there's one more example at the end there. Norman and Amy will be there tomorrow. Again, the time location is at the very end. The adverb there is at the end as well, but the location or the time is at the very end. Okay, let's move on to maybe the trickiest point with adverbs of frequency. Adverbs of frequency can be found two places, but they're normally placed before the verb they modify, except for a few special ones. So let's start with the first example. The newspaper sells more than 5,000 copies daily. When you talk about a routine, as in how many days it's done, or how many years, how often it's done in a year, we place it at the end. So you can also say, the newspaper sells more than 5,000 copies daily, or more than 5,000 copies every year. But when we have more general adverbs of frequency describing a general routine rather than how often it's done per day or per year, we place them before the verb. For example, I sometimes go to the gym. Here, sometimes describes the frequency of the verb going, to go, sorry. So I sometimes go to the gym. Again, he can always contact me if he needs me. Notice when you have an auxiliary verb, or I call them helper verbs, not main verbs, the adverb is placed after that helper verb. Here, the helper verb is can. Can describes the verb contact. And notice the adverb of frequency, always, it describes how often, how frequently he contacts me. That's placed before the verb, but after the auxiliary verb. He can always contact me. The second one, Kathy is often late for work. Notice here that it is placed after the be verb. Here, often is describing the adjective late. It's not a verb, but you can treat it like a verb because often is describing the word late. So I give a more general suggestion is place the adverb before the word it modifies. In those ones with verbs, sometimes go, always contact, the adverb is describing the verb. Here, often is describing how often lateness occurs. So, Kathy is often late for work. Okay, let's move on to a few commonly confused adverbs, just like that point before when we had my late father or my father is late. A funny adverb adjective confusion. This one is dead. So in the first sentence there, dead is an adjective. Remember, you can say he is dead. The washing machine is dead. Notice you can use it for not just living things, but electronics or machinery. If something doesn't work, for example, a battery, you can also say it's dead. Oh, my battery is dead. Here, dead men tell no tales, a very common English expression, meaning dead men can't talk. They cannot tell the truth. But you can also use dead as an adverb, and it means very, very, very. But this is a very casual phrasing. I am dead serious. A more common phrasing would be I am deadly serious. But using dead kind of in this joking term is casual, and it makes even more emphasis. Wow, you are dead wrong. You are really, 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 really wrong. In that case, you actually don't say you are deadly wrong. You are dead wrong. Extremely. Infinitely. Compared to I am deadly serious, which means very. Dead means extremely. Let's move on to the next commonly confused pair. This time we're looking at that little word near. So there is a new library near the train station. So near here means close to, or a short distance away from. But you can also use it as an adverb, and it really has a similar meaning. Your English is near perfect. You might see a comparison to the previous slide. You can say your English is nearly perfect. But near is a much more casual phrasing. I would not focus on this usage too much because near perfect is borderline unnatural and very, very casual. Surely you would say your English is nearly perfect. Oh, and did I use surely there? We'll look at it later. Okay, let's move on to the next pair. Okay, we have a few here. The word hard, or the adverb hardly. He is hard to please. Notice hard is placed after the verb. He is hard to please. Here it's describing a state. And hard to please, it means difficult. He is difficult to please. It is not easy to please him, to make him happy. The next one, I study hard every day for my dream. Again, it means I study diligently. It doesn't have anything to do with difficulty. It means doing something in a motivated manner. I worked hard. I did it with lots of effort. And finally, I can hardly see anything because of the thick fog. You can also use nearly, or sorry, not nearly, barely. I can barely see anything because of the thick fog. Means only a little bit. So I can only a little bit see things because of the fog. I can only see things a little bit. Or I can only see things slightly because of the thick fog. Notice these three different meanings and similar spellings and identical spellings for that difficult or lots of effort with hard. Let's look at the next pair. Oh, look at that. It's another use of late. We already looked at late two ways. Someone who is not living, my late turtle, and also something that is slow. My turtle was late because it is slow. Here, we mean stays up late, which means a time at night. It means not going to bed at an early time. Stays up late every Friday. For me, I would say that's probably 12 o'clock, but it also emphasizes a time after normal. So if Monica normally goes to bed at 7, staying up late could mean 9. Not late for you and I, perhaps, but for Monica, it is late. And I haven't seen Joshua lately. That means in recent times. Importantly, notice the present perfect. I haven't seen. So I haven't seen Joshua lately. Let's look at that more in the next slide. Recently versus lately. A simple error, but once you learn the grammar usage, you'll remember it quickly. First example, my company made a lot of improvements recently. Notice the simple past tense. My company made a lot of improvements recently. You can also use the present perfect with recently. My company has made a lot of improvements recently. Compare that to lately, which is only used with the present perfect. You cannot say, my company made a lot of improvements recently. But you can say, my company has made a lot of improvements lately. And in general, I would say lately is a longer time frame than recently. For example, if you want to compare them, this is not a strict definition, but recently might mean this week, and lately might mean 2 weeks. Lately is just a longer period of time before than recently. Okay, let's look at one more pair. Certainly versus surely. I mentioned it before. So number 1, my boss Chuck certainly doesn't think we can beat our competitor with this proposal. Certainly means my boss Chuck is certain. He is sure. It's only based, the important point is this only refers to my boss, Chuck. It's not my opinion. This is only Chuck's thinking. So when we say my boss Chuck certainly doesn't think, that's Chuck's point of view. Chuck is certain. Chuck is very sure. He has a strong opinion and a strong belief. When you use surely, it's describing your own view, and also it describes a contrast between your view and someone else. For example, my boss, Chuck, surely doesn't think we can beat our competitor with this proposal. Here, Shirley describes my opinion of my boss, Chuck. In the first example, my boss, Chuck, certainly doesn't think. It means Chuck's opinion. He doesn't think. I know it. But in the second one, my boss, Chuck, surely doesn't think. I don't know what Chuck thinks. But surely he doesn't think. I believe he doesn't think. That's the biggest difference. Certainly describes something that is known about someone else. Surely describes your view of something. For example, oh, surely Nick is coming soon. I don't know if Nick is coming soon, but this is my view of Nick. I think Nick is coming soon. Similarly, my boss Chuck surely doesn't think. It means I think my boss Chuck doesn't think. So think of it that way. Instead of using surely, if you can replace that with I think, my opinion, then surely is the correct choice. But certainly is describing something that you know about something. Okay, let's move on to one review before we finish the entire presentation. Okay, let's finish off this presentation with a quick quiz. Number 1, I ate a lot of sweets lately or recently. I'll give you a hint. Think of the tense there. Number 2, my husband works very hard or hardily. That's a tricky one. Number 3, Mary will join us for lunch tomorrow here or here tomorrow. Remember the structure of adverbs there. Okay, here are the answers. Ta-da! Number 1, I ate a lot of sweets recently. Why do we use recently? Because of the past tense. I ate a lot of sweets. If you want to use lately, you must use the present perfect. For example, I have eaten a lot of sweets lately. Remember, recently can be used with both. I ate a lot of sweets recently, or I have eaten a lot of sweets recently. And recently kind of sounds more recent, more close to the current time, compared to lately, farther in the past. Number 2, my husband works very hard. Remember, hard can mean with a lot of effort. Hardly means only a little bit or a very small amount. Notice that you can't use very hardly, because hardly also describes a frequency, like rarely. So that's unnatural. My husband works very hard. He works in a hard manner, a strenuous, lots of effort. And finally, Mary will join us for lunch here tomorrow. Remember the structure. Time at the very end and location before that. Location is at the end, but if there is a time, the time is at the very end. So Mary will join us for lunch here tomorrow. Here is the location. Tomorrow is the time. Okay, that's it. Let's wrap up this presentation. You made it! This is the end of my presentation on adjectives and adverbs. They're tricky, but they give your writing and your speaking some flavor, something interesting. So try and use adjectives and adverbs, but not too many. Too much of a good thing, after all. So, we started with adjectives. Remember, they're normally placed before the noun. Again, adjectives are used with nouns. Replace them before the noun, except for those collective nouns, like something interesting. You can have a blue ship, but anything blue. The next one, remember the structure. We have the determiners. They describe the specific thing, like 10, or this, or my. Those are placed before the opinion or subjective adjectives, like beautiful, or interesting, funny, kind, boring, all of those. And then you move down. Next you have things like the newness or oldness. Then the color. First before that you have the shape or the size. and then you have the color, and then you have the origin, and like American or Canadian, Japanese. And then you have the material, like wooden or silk or cotton. Remember, I gave you that example with the electric car as well, the German electric car. Also propulsion. Propulsion is how something moves is there at the end. A steam engine compared to a diesel train. Next, if you're using the same kind of adjectives, the shorter one comes first. You don't say a funny, kind teacher. You say Nick is a kind and funny teacher. The next one, state is usually afterwards. Like those are the adjectives with a at the beginning. Nick is asleep, or Nick is away. There's another one. Before we continue though, remember when you have adjectives of the same category, you need to use either a comma or and to connect them, right? A nice and funny teacher. But if you want to use different categories, using, for example, the origin, Canadian, and a subjective, a handsome, you can say a handsome Canadian teacher. You don't need a comma or and between those two adjectives, handsome and Canadian. And again, remember that quick point, singulars for hyphenated adjectives. A 30-something-year-old teacher. You don't use 30-something-years-old teacher. You don't say a 5-year-old computer or a 20-minute bake. You say 20-minute bake. You don't say 20 minutes. You never use the plural for hyphenated adjectives when you connect a number like 30 and a counter like 30-year period. 20-minute walk. Never 20 minutes. Then we looked at adverbs. Remember, these are not used with nouns. They're used with adjectives. They're used with other adverbs. And they're used with verbs. So they're normally used before the before the word they modify, or at the very end. When they're used with verbs, they're placed after the verb and at the end. So he runs quickly, he speaks quickly, or he speaks elegantly, he speaks eloquently. And if you have an object, he taught English simplistically. The object there is English. He taught English, so we have the adverb simplistically at the end. If you have an auxiliary noun, one of those helper nouns, helper verbs, auxiliary verbs, the adverb is placed after that, and usually before the verb. So he can always, these are for frequency adverbs, of course. They are usually placed before the word they modify. So he usually teaches Spanish, or he often rides his bike. They are used before the word, before the verb. He often rides, and if there's an auxiliary verb, it's placed after that. So he can sometimes bake, and he can sometimes bake well. Remember, when it's describing how the action is done, not compared to how frequently is done. When you describe how the action is done, that's the one that's placed at the end. And if there's an object, after the object. The final point we looked at for adverbs and structure, it's easy one, time and location at the end. Which one comes at the very end? Of course, it's time. I'm going home now, or I'll meet you for lunch here later. Here is location, later is time. And we also looked at a few pairs. Remember, dead or dead serious, the dead man, or I'm dead serious, and a few others. The most important one I want to highlight is that recently and lately, recently, present perfect, or the simple past, or lately is only the present perfect. only the present perfect. I have been busy lately compared to I am busy recently, I was busy recently, or I have been busy recently. And the last one, surely and certainly. Remember, certainly is something that is known. Oh, Nick is certainly going to come soon. I know he's going to come soon. But I know he's going to come soon. Nick is surely going to come soon. I don't know if Nick will come soon, but I believe it. Surely is that difference. It emphasizes what you believe, but you're not certain. One small point I didn't make earlier is it also describes when there's a difference between your opinion and the other person's opinion. For example, if someone tells me, I love the Avengers, that person likes the Avengers, but I disagree. So I will say, you surely don't like the Avengers, right? There's a difference between my opinion and that person's opinion. That's another quick tip about surely and certainly. Well, I think that is the end of this presentation on adjectives and adverbs. Thanks so much for watching all the way to the end. My name is Nic Sensei, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye!